Hey everyone. I never thought I'd be here, but I guess there's a first time for everything, right? I'm 33, my wife, Emily, is 31, and we've been married for almost 7 years. For most of that time, I thought we were rock solid. We're the kind of couple everyone thought was made for each other. Same sense of humor, same love for road trips, late-night deep talks, the works. If you asked anyone around us, they'd say we were the last couple to deal with, well, this. But for the past few months, things just didn't feel right. It started as little things. Emily was suddenly obsessed with her appearance, working out more, buying new clothes she never wore around me. And she started going out a lot. Supposedly with friends. I'd never known her to need so much time away, but I figured maybe she needed space, a hobby, or just a little adventure. Marriage isn't easy, and I didn't want to be that husband who's paranoid over every new change. So, I tried not to think much of it, until it started to snowball. She'd be glued to her phone late at night, smiling at texts she claimed were from Stacy, or Kelly, from work. But she'd lock her phone whenever I was around. I'd ask her about it, and she'd snap back with, "Can't I have some privacy?" Which was odd. We never had a problem with open communication, until now. A few weeks after things started feeling off, Emily told me she'd be working late. Nothing unusual, she had a demanding job. But that night, something felt different. Call it intuition, or maybe I just hit my breaking point. She left around 6 p.m., saying she'd be home by midnight. At around 9 p.m., I was scrolling mindlessly through social media when a picture popped up, a group shot of some mutual friends at a restaurant downtown. And right in the middle, sitting close to some guy I'd never seen before, was Emily. She was supposed to be at work, but there she was, smiling like she was having the time of her life. I felt my stomach drop. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe she had just stopped by for a quick drink with friends. But something in me knew this wasn't innocent. I decided to drive over to the restaurant, just to, check in. I parked across the street and waited. After about half an hour, I saw her walk out, hand in hand with that guy from the photo. She didn't see me, and honestly, it felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. There they were, laughing, leaning into each other like I'd seen her lean into me so many times. They walked down the block, and I followed them, trying to stay far enough back so they wouldn't notice me. Eventually, they ducked into a small bar nearby. I didn't go in, just waited outside like an idiot, watching the clock as the minutes turned into an hour. She finally came home around 1 a.m., way past the time she'd said she'd be back. I was sitting on the couch when she walked in, acting like everything was normal. She glanced at me, a bit surprised I was still awake, and muttered, "You're up late." I kept calm and just said, "How was work?" She hesitated, but then smiled and said, "Exhausting. Glad to be home." That lie was all I needed to lose it. I couldn't pretend anymore, couldn't play along with this facade. I asked, "Were you really at work?" She blinked, eyes widening. "What are you talking about?" I told her I'd seen her at the restaurant, seen her with the guy she'd left with. For a second, she just stared at me, mouth slightly open. Then, just like that, her face shifted, and she was on the defensive. "Oh my God, are you spying on me now?" She tried to flip it around, going on about how I was controlling and paranoid, and how she couldn't believe I didn't trust her. When I pressed further, she finally let out a half-baked excuse. She said he was just a friend from work, and she'd had to meet him to discuss a project in private, away from the office. And that hand-holding? It was a joke. "He's going through a hard time," she said, like that made any sense. I couldn't believe she was lying straight to my face, so I told her I didn't buy it. She got louder, accusing me of not understanding her need for space, and for trying to ruin her social life. But the more she defended herself, the more the cracks showed. After that fight, I was a mess. I barely slept that night, replaying her words over and over, trying to make sense of what I'd seen and heard. Was I losing my mind? Was she somehow telling the truth? But the image of her holding his hand, laughing like I hadn't seen her do in ages, was burned into my brain. The next few days were hell. She acted like nothing was wrong, but I could barely look at her without feeling a wave of anger and sadness. Everything in our home felt tainted: our bed, our kitchen, even the little inside jokes we used to share. I wanted to believe it was all a mistake, some huge misunderstanding. But I kept replaying her lies, how quickly she'd turned on me, calling me controlling and paranoid. It made me question everything. I tried talking to a friend, but the words wouldn't come out right. How do you admit to someone that your wife, the person you built a life with, is probably cheating? I felt ashamed, stupid for not seeing it sooner, and maybe even scared that I'd have to make a decision I wasn't ready for. A week went by, and things only got worse. Emily started staying out even later, always with another excuse lined up. She was either working late, catching up with an old friend, or needing some alone time. Every excuse was flimsier than the last, and yet each one hit harder. I didn't want to become some paranoid investigator in my own marriage, but I couldn't take the not knowing. One night, I couldn't help myself. After she left to meet Stacy, I checked her laptop, which she'd left logged in. And there it was, in plain sight, a string of messages with a guy named Jake, probably the same guy from the restaurant. My heart was pounding as I read through them. It was all there, the flirting, the reminiscing about last night, even mentions of intimate moments they'd shared that I could barely bring myself to read. I'd never felt so betrayed in my life. She had gone from lying to my face to flaunting her affair right under my nose. My whole body was shaking. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or confront her right then and there. The messages made it clear that this was no one-time fling or some emotional support she was providing. It was real, and it was happening right in front of me. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I waited until Emily got home, heart racing as I paced the living room. She walked in, looking surprised to see me up. "What's wrong?" she asked, feigning concern. I didn't give her a chance to play innocent this time. I slammed her laptop onto the coffee table, my voice shaking but firm. "You want to explain these?" I pointed at the screen, where the messages from Jake still lingered like a haunting ghost. Her face went pale, and for a moment she was speechless. Then the storm began. "How dare you go through my stuff?" she shouted, her eyes narrowing. "This is such an invasion of privacy." But I was done with her deflection. "This isn't about privacy. This is about you cheating on me." I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak, and I saw her mask of anger slip for just a second. In that moment, I could see a flicker of guilt, but she quickly covered it up. "Jake is just a friend. You're twisting everything," she protested, her voice rising. But I was already beyond the point of caring about her excuses. I needed answers. I pressed her, demanding to know if this was really just a friendship, or if it had crossed the line into something more. She paused, and I could feel the tension hanging in the air, thick and suffocating. "Okay, fine. Maybe it was a little more than that," she finally admitted, but then immediately backtracked. "But you don't understand. You've been so distant lately, and I just needed someone who actually listened." I stood there, feeling the weight of her words crashing down on me. She was trying to turn this around yet again, making me the villain in my own story. It was maddening. I was reeling, not just from the revelation but from the sheer audacity of her excuses. It felt like the ground had fallen away beneath me, and I was left flailing in a free fall of confusion and pain. My mind raced. How had we gotten to this point? "I can't believe you'd do this," I said, voice breaking. "I thought we had a real partnership, one built on trust. Was any of it real?" Emily's expression shifted from anger to something more vulnerable. "I never wanted it to come to this. I don't know. I wanted to feel something again." That struck me hard. I felt a pang of sympathy for the woman I thought I knew, but it quickly morphed into a crushing wave of betrayal. I couldn't just sweep this under the rug. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a pattern of deception. After what felt like hours of shouting and tears, I made my decision. I didn't want to fight for a marriage that was already so fractured. I told her I needed space to think, that I couldn't stay in a situation that made me feel so small. She pleaded with me to reconsider, but I stood my ground. I packed a bag and headed to my brother's place. As I drove, I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and a strange sense of relief. I was free from the weight of her lies, but I was also heartbroken over the life we built together. Staying at my brother's felt like a whirlwind of emotions. I spent days processing everything, trying to understand not just Emily's betrayal but also my own role in our relationship. I realized that while I had trusted her, I had also neglected my own feelings, allowing myself to be swept up in her changes instead of addressing them. As the days turned into weeks, I found clarity. I understood that this wasn't just about her cheating. It was about the disconnect that had grown between us. It wasn't all her fault. I had stopped being the attentive partner I used to be, and we both let the distance between us grow. I began to focus on myself, going to the gym, picking up old hobbies, and spending quality time with family and friends. I slowly felt a sense of healing wash over me. I made the decision to officially separate. When I finally told Emily, she broke down, begging for another chance and promising to change. But I knew better now. Trust is a fragile thing. Once it's shattered, it's nearly impossible to piece back together. I wished her well but stood firm in my choice. In the aftermath, I learned a lot about love and self-respect. My advice to anyone in a similar situation? Pay attention to the red flags, trust your instincts, and never compromise your self-worth for the sake of a relationship. It's easy to get caught up in the idea of love, but real love requires honesty and effort from both sides. It's okay to walk away when it no longer serves you, even if it feels painful at first. It's a journey, but I'm learning to embrace this new chapter of my life with hope and determination.